Hello everybody, it's me Scoopin'. Fun fact, I just had COVID. I had it over winter break and a remote week of school, and I'm feeling fine now. I've just been exhausted. So between catching up on Destiny 2, Spider-Man PS4, and Halo Infinite, which sucks, by the way, don't play Halo Infinite. I'm very upset about this, but that's a video for another day. I've been revisiting the Iron Man saga, actually. That's right, I rewatched all 9 films centered around Iron Man. Yes, Spider-Man Homecoming is included in there, so make all your Iron Boy Jr. jokes right now and get them out of the way. And I'm here to talk about all 9 of them. Not in this video, because that would just be way too freaking long. I'm going to do it in 3 phases, but you know. So the 3 phases, I've broken them up into are Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and the first Avengers, the Asshole Trilogy. We have Iron Man 3, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Captain America Civil War as the Fear Trilogy. And then, of course, Spider-Man Homecoming, Avengers Endgame, and Avengers Infinity War as the Infinity Trilogy, as, you know, would make sense. So today we're obviously starting with the Asshole Trilogy with Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and the Avengers. I'm not fully reviewing any non-Iron Man films like the Avengers movies or Spider-Man Homecoming, but I'm still going to give some general thoughts, and I probably won't give them a score either. But, you know, we're just going to talk about Iron Man and his development and how he is in every movie because I think that's interesting. So yeah, obviously the Iron Man trilogy itself is getting a full review, but beyond that, it's going to be a bit iffy. It's all just, it's Tony Stark time, guys. It's Tony Stark time. And if you enjoy the series, maybe one day I'll do one about Captain America because I've only seen Captain America, the First Avenger, like once, where I've seen Iron Man 3 like 6 or 7 times. And Winter Soldier we'll talk about later. But I'm not talking about Thor. You guys aren't getting me to rewatch Thor 1 and 2. I couldn't even finish them the first time, so having to like take notes on them and stuff for a video, it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. So without further ado, because YouTube analytics say I've probably lost about 35% of viewers already, let's talk about the first MCU movie, Iron Man, metallic clank noise. So yeah, this probably won't be a surprise to many of you, but the first Iron Man is actually really good. I mean, go figure. First and foremost, the Iron Man suits look incredible. They actually built most of the suits practically, and you can definitely tell as the movies go along that it gets more and more CGI. We'll talk about this later, but I 100% prefer the chunkier practical suits to the form-fitted CG nanotech suits. So, quick plot summary time. Tony Stark is the head of Stark Industries, a weapons manufacturing company he runs with his father's old business partner, Obadiah Stane. Toby visits the Middle East to sell some weapons and gets kidnapped by terrorists. Awesome. He gets some metal making its way into his heart, so the legendary Jensen does the only reasonable thing. He puts a big magnet in Tony's chest to keep the metal from reaching his heart, and he powers the magnet with a car battery, obviously. Tony builds a giant metal suit powered by an arc reactor to help him and Jensen escape, but sadly Jensen doesn't make it and tells Tony not to waste his life. Once he's back in the US, Tony works on improving his suit design, has Stark Tech stop selling weapons, and his old partner decides to steal both the OG suit and its power source, the arc reactor, so Tony blows him up, as he should. It might not sound that great, but it's honestly one of the MCU's best origin stories if you ask me. Thor and Captain Marvel are really boring, Captain America is fine, but its villain isn't as good as Ironmonger, which is probably a hot take, but whatever, and gets a little too goofy with its antagonist. But Guardians and Ant-Man are pretty great origins too, so. And we'll talk about Homecoming eventually. Personally, the thing that this movie does right is have the conflict mostly centered around Tony Stark being an asshole.
Good God, you're a woman. But you have actually excellent bone structure there. I'm kind of having a hard time not looking at you now.
This goes for the sequel as well, which is obviously how I got the name for the trilogy, so yeah. Ironmonger doesn't show up until the final fight, basically, and he's kind of just a foil to Tony business-wise until that point. We spend a lot of time with Stark in the cave, so when he gets out and his whole worldview is different, we really get it. Yeah, he's an asshole going in and out of the cave, but coming in, he's an asshole who cares about other people. Alright, because my grandpa watches these videos, I should probably stop cursing so much, so from now on, instead of saying the word asshole, I'm going to say the word butt munch. And you guys are just going to go with that because that's what we're doing now. The cold open of Tony getting blown up is great because it grabs our attention and makes us concerned about Tony's safety. Because if we open with the extended flashback of how he got there that comes after, no one would really like Tony because he's so much of a butt munch who kind of deserves to get blown up by his own weapon if we're being honest. But when Jensen has him realize how he really has no one in his life besides Pepper, and Tony is forced to see what happens when his weapons are in the wrong hands, it's really powerful stuff, and once again, shows us how he could go through such a drastic change in character so rapidly. In fact, he kind of goes through this change too rapidly, which is part of the conflict. Once Tony is out and he's working on his suits, he becomes way too obsessed with righting the wrongs of his company, and it leads to this great interaction between him and Pepper.
There's nothing to sign. There's the next mission. And nothing else.
But side note, I gotta say, the first real Iron Man scene of Tony getting revenge with his Mark III is amazing. He does not hold back, and it shows him off as the powerful force he really needs to be in these early movies. And Jon Favreau made a big deal that when we first see Iron Man fly, it should be a huge moment and we need to fly with him, and they totally achieve it here. The camera work is fantastic, and whoever had the idea to do close-ups of Tony in his suit is just absolutely genius. They need an award. So yeah, Tony kind of veers too far in the savior direction to the point where he still isn't learning his lesson and living his life. He's so neglectful of his relationships, he doesn't even notice his partner literally wants him dead. I know a lot of people rag on Stain here as Ironmonger, but I think he does a decent job. He's a reflection of what Tony would probably become. Someone who's just dirty and cares about making money and growing the business no matter what the human cost. And yeah, sure, it's pretty whack, he just builds the suit off screen and shows up with it in the final battle, but it reflects himself perfectly. Tony worked towards a design that was colorful, like Tony's amazing personality, and more maneuverable and adaptable, like Tony's intellect, versus Stain, who just built a big gray Iron Man suit because he thinks bigger is better. He doesn't know technology, he just knows money. In this way, the I am Iron Man factor of the movie is very subtle but well done. Stain is just a leech on Tony and probably Howard's ideas, which is why Tony wins in the end. He's the one with the ideas, so he's really the only one who is Iron Man.
How'd you solve the icing problem?
Icing problem.
Might want to look into it.
And back to Stain for a minute, he's honestly the only thing dragging this movie down, because up until his suit shows up, the movie has been going fine without a traditional antagonist. And Obi's plan to kill Tony and use the arc reactor to make an army of suits that no one can stop so the US can dominate and Stark Tech can be really rich, it's just kind of meh. I mean, it probably could have worked, and I would imagine Stain would have the means to cover up Tony's murder, but when the fight kind of spills out onto the highway and Stain picks up a car full of kids, I start to wonder what he's really trying to do. If I had to guess, the studio, or even Favreau himself, from what it sounds like in some interviews, weren't completely sold that a movie like this could do well without a traditional villain, and they really did shoot most of this movie without a script, like it was constantly changing on the fly. So I feel like they probably had a more personal conclusion to the Stain-Stark conflict, but they changed it to this last minute. But overall, it doesn't ruin the movie, it's just a little bit odd. So yeah, by the end of the movie, Tony's doing way better than he was. He and Pepper are really starting something. He's got his friendship with Rhodey, only on screen. Yikes. He lets the world know he's Iron Man, but he probably doesn't have to do too much in the Iron Man suit for the time being, which, we'll discuss in the next movie. And he can protect the world while still having time for himself. So I gotta say, movie's pretty solid. Love Tony Stark, love the Iron Man, it all looks fantastic, all the performances are very solid, so yeah, 7.5 out of 10, slightly above average. So yeah, now we have Iron Man 2, and this movie's actually easier to explain even though there's way more going on here. Tony Stark is Iron Man, and that has ushered in world peace for now, so he's just kind of showboating and running the Stark Expo to show off new technology. Meanwhile, he's dying from poisoning caused by the metal in his arc reactor that he can't replace. Meanwhile, S.H.I.E.L.D. is watching him and analyzing Stark to see if he can join the Avengers. Meanwhile, Tony's dad's partner's son wants revenge on the Stark name and builds himself an arc reactor and whipping machine, so Tony has to take him down. Meanwhile, Tony's current competitor, Justin Hammer from Hammer Tech, wants to take Tony's suits along with the government because the government thinks he can't have a weapon of mass destruction, and Hammer just wants to take down Stark Industries, so he works with Whiplash. So yeah, this movie has a lot going on. And the thing that makes me so conflicted about it is that separately, all these things actually work pretty well, but all at once, it's just a bit rough. So let me break it down. Tony trying not to die from his arc reactor is great. It should have been the main focus of the movie, and while it is up there is so much other stuff going on that it has a bit of a lackluster conclusion.
Congratulations, son. You have created a new element.
That was easy.
The way it makes him a bit careless and very self-destructive is great and in character, though. And all the stuff in this plotline works great. The Iron Man vs. Rhodey fight is great and really leads into Tony's low point. But if you ask me, his low point should not be halfway through the movie. The Stark Expo stuff isn't really a plotline, it's more of just a backdrop for the Justin Hammer Whiplash stuff and part of Tony's ego thing, so I'm not going to say it's unnecessary either. I also really like Hammer and Whiplash together, but I think this is what hurts the movie the most. The Tony dying plotline is really the best one, but this plotline is what leads into all the others, so it's incredibly difficult to say what to cut and what to keep. Whiplash's first fight with Tony is dumb because yeah, someone else built an arc reactor, but Tony beats him within like a minute of suiting up. So it's kind of hard to consider him a threat, which like he's supposed to kind of show the world that, Tony can't protect them or something, which isn't really what happened, but okay. And the performance from Mickey Rourke here is pretty rough, let me tell you. But his juxtaposition and rapport with this movie's golden boy really does it for me, so I don't want to cut him either. Justin freaking Hammer. Most people hate this guy. They think he's a stupid villain who does nothing but drag this movie down. But believe me when I tell you, they could not be more wrong. Justin Hammer is one of the most hateable yet entertaining villains in the MCU. This guy is so insecure, unthreatening and stuck up that every moment on screen with him is a pleasure. Literally all he does in this movie is get embarrassed by Tony in front of the entire country, so he sneaks a dude out of jail just to get hundreds of millions of dollars wasted by Whiplash, and then gets arrested. That's it. This dude sucks at being a villain. And while Whiplash is building him Iron Man suits that he doesn't even really want at this point, this dude gets slapped in the face because Rhodey literally just takes one of Iron Man's suits, brings it to the military, and tells Hammer just to put some weapons on it. Nothing he does goes right, and it's just a joy to hate this man. But sadly, the reason I think that these two characters are the biggest drag on Iron Man 2 is because Whiplash is what leads into the whole plotline with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony's dad. Well, lead is kind of a strong word here. They're actually totally separate. It just turns out that Whiplash is the son of Howard Stark's disgraced former partner, so they do tie in just very loosely. Meanwhile, Hammer is what ties into Tony's conflict with the US government wanting to take his suits. But honestly, I think that really is the only plotline that needs to be cut. I love that opening courtroom scene, but maybe just have Hammer Tech be tied to the military and just keep the military and the government out of the movie. Plus, what they do doesn't even make any sense. The government doesn't work this way. If they think you have a weapon of mass destruction, they're taking it. They're not negotiating with you in court and then not doing anything once you make fun of all of them. Removing the government plotline would trim a lot of fat that could be time given to connecting the idea of Tony finishing his dad's work, which helps him defeat Whiplash, rather than it just saving Tony's life leading into the final battle.
That tastes like coconut. Metal. Oh, wow, yeah!
Oh boy, yeah.
Because yeah, it's all important, but Tony could have defeated Whiplash with or without his old arc reactor. He just, would have died eventually from poisoning if he kept the old one, So the I Am Iron Man of this movie is kind of non-existent, which sucks, because Tony actually doesn't do too much fighting in the suit. He beats Whiplash in a minute or two both times just by, his suit being better or being stronger, so... Sure, when he defeats him with Rhodey's help in the end, he was smart by doing, the double repulsor blast thing, but really anyone who saw it the first time would remember to do it the second time. I mean, they were literally facing each other, so Tony was just like, hey Rhodey, ka-chow. Yeah, I love Tony synthesizing a new element based off a design his dad left, but that doesn't really have a noticeable impact on him being Iron Man besides Triangle. And the last thing to talk about in this Iron Man analysis is Tony's arc itself. He goes from showboating to wallowing to in love with Pepper, and it's kind of unimportant. I like his struggle, it's entertaining to watch and all, but it's not really important to his character in the grand scheme of MCU Tony Stark, if you know what I mean. Yeah, now he's in love with Pepper and he's trying to be a better man for her, but it honestly feels super similar to how the last movie left off, except now they kiss. I don't know. Just as a side note, one thing that actually does play well off the last movie is that there's actually a bit of world peace. Essentially, the idea of Iron Man is so intimidating that people just haven't bothered doing anything major, which is kind of a cool concept. And the reason this works well off of the last movie is because, like I said, when he actually is out there being Iron Man, he is really strong and powerful and just absolutely brutal. So it makes sense that people would see footage of that or hear, the stories of what he did and be terrified of him. And honestly, I think this is part of why the bulkier design just works better for me. He shrugs off hits left and right in the opening and he blows shit up, and I feel like his new suit, even if it could just repair any damage, he would get knocked over by everything. It also just feels too light for me, like getting blasted by a repulsor has lost its impact at this point, and here it just sends stuff flying and exploding and whatever, it's awesome. I just realized I didn't make that point very clear, but what I mean is the new CG suit, it looks too thin because it's form-fitted and the material looks off because it's completely CG, and when he's blasting stuff, it just doesn't have the weight of the OG suit, so yeah. So overall, I don't think this movie is as bad as people say it is, it just has a problem being cohesive, because yeah, while it does have a bunch of great plot threads, there's simply too many to be connected neatly. So Iron Man gets a 5.5 out of 10. Enjoyable, but below average. Alright, so last movie we're talking about today, The Avengers. So weirdly enough, I actually don't have too much to say about The Avengers. I'll give it a bit more of a review than the other three Avengers movies because Tony Stark doesn't have too much going on here. I'm not going to bother fully re-explaining the plot of Avengers 1 because you guys already know and it's super simple. Loki, Tesseract, Avengers Assemble. So Tony Stark here is suffering from, as Full Fat Videos likes to put it, Whedonism, where essentially Joss Whedon takes one aspect of a character that people love and just dials it up to 100. In this case, Tony goes from being a bit of a butt munch with a great heart and some person versus self conflicts to just being an almost unbearable butt munch.
What's your thing, Pilates?
What? It's like calisthenics. You might have missed a couple things, doing time as a capsicle.
He's honestly pretty mean in this movie, mostly towards Captain America. And yeah, it's hinted at that Tony is kind of upset with him because Tony's dad didn't love him that much. And, Tony's dad loved Captain America and he always talked about him. But that should have been resolved in the last movie with that whole Tony finishing Howard's plans plotline. And it's just kind of weird it's brought up again here, but whatever. Howard Stark literally said this.
What is and always will be my greatest creation
is you.
And sure, Captain America is one of Howard Stark's creations, but that doesn't really, mesh with that very powerful line from Iron Man 2. So I just don't get it. I do adore his relationship with Bruce, and I think it's actually super interesting that Tony pretty much immediately sees a similarity between Iron Man and the Hulk that most people probably never would. It's a very with great power comes great responsibility type of moment, where Tony acknowledges he can't really get rid of the arc reactor, but it's just another part of what makes him Iron Man, so it's really a good thing. And when he built it with the help of Jensen, he went on to, save a bunch of lives, because being Iron Man's great. And now Bruce suffers from the Hulk. But Tony encourages him to try and learn and use it for good, and that's exactly what happens by the end of the movie. So upon rewatch, I was actually shocked at how good the moment is when the Hulk punches the giant monster thing, because I had noticed up to that point that Tony was constantly asking where Bruce was, or kind of like testing him during the movie. So when Tony flies around the corner with the giant thing following him so the Hulk can knock it down, super satisfying moment, great job. I really don't understand what happened with Tony's personality in this movie, because this scene is great.
Maybe your army comes, and maybe it's too much for us, but it's all on you. Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
And the opening scene with him is great, if not maybe leaning a bit too much into sarcasm and quips. But once he gets on the helicarrier, he's just a massive butt munch. Also, side note about this opening scene, I cannot believe no one has brought up this moment between Tony and Pepper when Tony's called into action.
You have homework. You have a lot of homework.
Well, what if I didn't?
If you didn't?
Yes.
You mean when you finished?
Something tells me I should put it in a lockbox and drop it to the bottom of the lake. Go to bed.
But would you be able to rest?
It just makes the scene in Endgame even better, which I didn't even think was possible, but Pepper's been scared yet understanding of his avenging since the very start. Alright, so while Tony's character is off for most of the movie, we do actually get a lot of good Iron Man action. Some of it's cut a little weirdly, where you don't really feel the impact, but that's mostly a hand-to-hand type of fight problem. Overall, I really enjoy the stuff Iron Man has to do in this movie, and the suit still looks amazing. I don't like triangle as much as circle, probably because I play too much Destiny, so I'm just biased like that, I don't really know what to tell you. But the Mark 7 he pulls out for the final battle looks incredible. It is the perfect Iron Man suit if you ask me. It feels powerful, it looks tanky with the big jetpack thing on the back. The rocket mode of it is like a perfect combination between the portable but not very useful suitcase and the extremely portable but not very durable kind of multi-piece assembly thing that's going on in Iron Man 3. And the helmet doesn't fold back into the suit, the faceplate still has to pop up. I don't know what it is, but I like that so much better. I don't like that all the helmets are nanotech now. It just doesn't work for every character. I don't think Ant-Man should be able to just nanotech his helmet off whenever he needs to. And before I wrap up, we gotta talk about the massive terror in space in the room. The nuke. So, first off, it's perfect that Tony doesn't even hesitate to grab the nuke and immediately sees that throwing it through the portal is the best option for everyone, even if it will, probably kill him. It's just a really good bit of action, honestly, and I like the deleted scene from Endgame where Rocket makes fun of the OG Avengers for not trying this immediately, because apparently the entire universe knows the Chitauri suck and everyone knows that blowing up their mothership is their weakness. And the look in Tony's eyes when he enters space absolutely sells the moment for me. This is the biggest shift in his character going forward. He was motivated by world peace in the first two films, but floating out into the nothingness of space, he sees that threats from across the universe are infinitely more dangerous and that he's hopelessly unprepared. This is the driving force behind Iron Man 3, so I'll save most of this talk for the next video, but I think the visual of Tony's suit immediately losing power and him passing out the second he goes through the portal is enough to demonstrate how far he has to go before he can truly protect the world. Like I said, I'm not doing a full review of the Avengers, but it's kind of meh overall. The opening really sucks, but everything with the Hulk is amazing. Loki's a good villain most of the time, the final battle is phenomenal, but you already knew that. I think this whole thing with the Council is pretty whack, and I'm sorry, this had to come out at some point. I kind of hinted at it earlier in the video, but I've never seen Captain America the Winter Soldier. I'm assuming the Council would come back in Winter Soldier because it's a very SHIELD-focused movie, and they don't come up in anything else ever again. So let me know in the comments if they do, and if they never show up again, including Winter Soldier. It's kind of awkward, I'm going to be honest with you. Hawkeye's used well here because he doesn't really add too much to the team in the early stages when they're already, I was about to say superhuman, but they're already a very human team because his humanity is kind of what pulls them together later on when they have like gods and magic everywhere. So it makes sense that Hawkeye is actually an antagonist for most of the movie and he works really well in this role. I love Cap in this movie even if he's definitely too dumb, but his overall respect for authority and general Boy Scoutness is really fun to watch, and he does really look like they just lifted a guy out of the mid-1900s and dropped him in modern day. After this movie, I feel like that aspect of his character is kind of lost for the most part, besides that I'll put it on the list. Black Widow's not great, but I never liked her anyway, and I couldn't even finish her own movie, so whatever. If you like her, fine, but I really don't, so whatever. Thor's pretty boring too. He's too Shakespearean and I can't take what he says seriously, especially his scene with Loki on the mountain.
The world I love is broken, but it's for your imagined slides. No. It's under my protection.
What was that, Joss Whedon? So yeah, I think Avengers is a bit too long to be regularly rewatched at almost 2.5 hours. It has some flaws, and it's lit like a TV show for some reason, but it's mostly an enjoyable experience. It's hard to score this movie because of the massive impact it had on, like, everything, and does the general Avengers assembling stuff very well, considering it's the first movie of its kind. So yeah, it gets a 6 out of 10, but it also gets my respect for everything that it did for cinema. Anyway guys, this is the longest scripted video I've ever done, which you can see me glancing back and forth at it. I don't know what the total runtime is going to be. As of recording, I'm at 28 minutes, so probably somewhere around 23 to 25 minutes, which is fine. It took 3 hours to write the script, and it's going to take God knows how many hours to edit it all together, so hopefully you really enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure to let me know with, the likes and the comments and the subs and whatever, and let me know that you want to see the part 2 before I get working on that. Thank you so much if you made it this far, and keep it crispy.